So getting to that point, then once you kind of map that out, how do you actually do that engagement? How do you conduct stakeholder engagement? We've already flagged that ESRS explicitly, they do not mandate specific and behavioral stakeholder engagement. So we're left to our own devices there, but we've been doing stakeholder engagement for years in materiality assessments throughout companies. So in that sense, there's a lot of ways already, existing stakeholder engagement channels and communication you might already have in place that you can just tap into. So it's thinking about at that first step, what do we already do? Do you already do employee engagement surveys? Talk to investor relations, talk to your supplier and procurement team. What relationships do they have? Human resources, like I said, look at if you have communities you're engaged with. Do you capture community grievances in some mechanism there? And what can you learn from that? So there might be a lot of existing channels and a lot of existing communication that you can leverage to get insights from. So that's one thing to always start with, to really kind of think through that. Now then, I think the classic one is surveys and questionnaires. People love that because, it's a love-hate relationship. Companies love it because they put one survey together, get it out, and we're done. But on the recipient end, it's like, this is not a survey. Here's 80 questions I need to answer. Most of them I don't understand. So that is really challenging. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail. How can we make these tools effective? Interviews and focus groups are a really effective way. They're more time intense because you're putting someone apart, you're talking to them, you're really trying to go deeper, more qualitative, but you can get some great insights there. So a combination between your targeted surveys and interviews is always a really kind of good way of drawing out quantitative and qualitative insights. But to your point earlier, Megan, sometimes you really need to just kind of, almost like do a bit of educational change management there, like bring the board or management along to make sure they drive that whole process. So if you do want to do a survey in your business and people, randomly get a survey, they have no clue what's happening, they're likely not to fill it out or don't know what to do with it. So if you really drive a top-down approach there, where you make sure that, your management and leadership are really across this and championing it and can explain that, down the business, why it's important, why you're doing it, it can really make a difference there. And you already touched upon the direct insights, research reports, analysis. So there's a lot of tools here. And the next slide, we'll go into how to make them a bit more effective. Any particular views on from experience? What are some of the main challenges that you've seen around using some of these tools?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things. So I think that the interviews, focus groups, anything in person are the single most valuable piece of a double materiality. You really get to engage with people. You get to understand that nuance of exactly what is happening. You get to hear in their own words, and I think that's incredibly valuable. The challenge with that is a couple of things. One, if you don't have internal teams bought in, sometimes it is hard to get on calendars. If you're trying to get on the calendar of the C-suite as well, their calendars are booked, months in advance. So that's also been a challenge. Just to scheduling, frankly, is a huge issue in that. I think too, it's really helpful. You can use those internal interviews to do that education piece, which is really helpful. If you know that your CFO is maybe not as versed in sustainability and you have the chance to sit down in front of them, you can use some of that time to really create that connection, help them to understand what is going on, what this process is, and help them to think about how financial components actually really do relate to this process and what you're doing. I think the most challenging thing, I will underscore it, is, if you are reaching out to external experts, external folks, getting them to respond if you're doing some sort of cold outreach is really challenging. It's really helpful to go through, if you already have an existing relationship through your procurement department or, someone else in the organization to help them create that connection. You're much more likely to get a positive response there. I've had, instances where we've just been really challenged to get external groups to talk to us. And even, with the company that we work with, even with them doing, some of the legwork there as well, it's sometimes a little disheartening, but you can use some of those, other indirect pieces where you're, looking at research or maybe some big data tools to help you sort of supplement some of that. So I think while the one-on-one touch points are critical, it is somewhat challenging sometimes, and I think that can cause, I've seen that delay some DMA processes or double materiality processes just because, it's just sort of dragging that out. And I think the other thing too is that surveys, if they are targeted and they are easy to understand, and they're not just something very generic, with asking them to respond to 100 questions about 100 different sustainability topics and potential risks and opportunities and impacts. They can be really great if they are targeted, but I don't, I hesitate sometimes on surveys because we've often seen, and very recently have seen many examples where mass surveys are just sort of sent out, and it's really not a way to get that valuable input, and the quality of it isn't really helpful either.
I think that's the key there, the quality. So with a mass survey, you might, if you're lucky, get a lot of responses, but what do you actually learn from that? What is the actual quality there? That is always the question there. So I think